Hello and welcome. I'm Jason White. This is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I'm going to be doing the Faces of Horror tag. This tag was originally created by Juan from over at Plagued by Visions. A link to his original video for this tag will be down there in the comments, so please go check that out. And if you're unfamiliar with Juan, which I doubt because he's awesome, definitely go give his channel a check out and subscribe to him. All right, I don't believe I was tagged by anyone to do this tag, and it's a horror tag, so I'm obviously going to do it. If you did tag me and I by chance missed it, please let me know in the comments and I will thank you. All right, so I'm going to get into the tag right now. Prompt number 1 is a horror story that scared or disturbed you. I'm kind of, I've talked quite a bit about the books that have scared me because I don't get scared very easily when I read horror. There's only a couple by the same author that I would claim have scared me, and I've talked about those books extensively. And the author is Tim Curran, and the books are Fear Me and The Underdwelling by Tim Curran. I highly recommend, if you've never seen me talk about those two books, I highly recommend that you go check them out right now because they scared me. They might not scare you, but they certainly scared me. There's something about Tim Curran's writing that can just really get under your skin. He when he wants to, he can really scare me. I don't know why that is. I don't know why he's the only one who can actually do it. But I don't want to talk about his books, those two books, for my answer in this. I'm going to go with what disturbed me. And what disturbed me the most, the thing that disturbed me the most that I've ever read was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. This should be no surprise to anyone who's read this book. This book is very, very disturbing. It's basically about a young girl who basically gets kidnapped by her neighbors, and they torture her. And this is actually something that was based off real life, something that happened in the 60s. I read this book way back in like 2004, 2005, and I vowed to myself I'll never read I'll never read that book ever again because it was just so hard to read. I wasn't a dad at the time, and I can only imagine reading it now that I am a dad, with, my fatherly eyes, that I don't think I could be able to do it. And it's funny, having a kid actually changed how I read horror because I used to like dark and disturbing things like that. And ever since I had my son, I've kind of softened up in a sense. I just don't like reading the disturbing stuff anymore. Maybe it's an aging thing too. I don't know. Does anyone else experience this at all? Prompt number 2, a horror story that depressed you or made you cry. Same with being scared. It's kind of hard to make me cry when I read a book. I guess because it's a horror story, you could think of a movie or something, but I'm sticking with books for this tag. Movies are actually more likely to make me cry, but books for some reason don't. So I'm going to go with the book that did make me cry, and it made me ugly cry at that. And I don't know why it made me cry. I'm wondering if maybe it wasn't just my state of mind at the time of reading it, but the ending of Horns by Joe Hill. And I've talked about this book because this question comes up in tags. Name a book that made you cry, a horror book that made you cry. And this book, it made me cry. It made me ugly cry. And it was would have been embarrassing had I been like on a bus or something. Prompt number 3, a horror story that made you laugh. Now, I can't think of any horror book that made me laugh, like extensively anyway. The most recent one I can actually think of is one that made me chuckle a lot. A Canadian Werewolf in New York by Mark Leslie. This book, it's not out and out knee slapping funny. It's more of it's got Mark Leslie's dry sense of humor. I highly recommend, if you like a dry sense of humor, I highly recommend checking out Mark Leslie Lefebvre's TikTok channel because he is the king of dry humor. And this book has a lot of little bits of dry humor mixed in. I remember listening to it on my on Audible and getting a good chuckle here and there within that. It's just a fun romp of a story. It's not even necessarily horror, but it's got horror elements to it. But I enjoyed my time, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Mark Leslie's fiction. Prompt number 4, a horror story that made you angry. There's nothing I can think of except for maybe The Girl Next Door. I'm going to cheat here and use the same book for this answer as I did for the first prompt. But there's an interesting story here. I got to see Jack Ketchum. I got to meet him too, which is really cool. But I got to see Jack Ketchum talk. I believe it was in 2007 at a festival, a fan expo festival in Toronto. I think it was in 2007. I think I already said that. But anyways, while he was talking, we watched a movie adaptation for his book Lost, or The Lost. And that was a really cool movie. I would have to say that movie, the experience of watching it with Jack Ketchum in the movie theater was really awesome. But he talked afterwards, and he was asked why he writes the types of stories that he writes, meaning that he takes a lot of real life things that have happened and he fictionalizes them. And Girl Next Door was mentioned in this question because of how disturbing it is. And he said that he writes stories like that because it pisses him off. And honestly, The Girl Next Door disturbed the living hell out of me. But the fact that it was based on something that actually happened also pissed me off. The lack of compassion towards another human being is just, especially a young girl, it's just ridiculous. That book will make you confront yourself in many different ways, and it disturbed the hell out of me, and it also pissed me off. And I think more people should read it just for that. All right, prompt number 5, a horror story that is important to you. Now, this one, another hard one for me to answer because there's so many books that are important to me, but there's a huge variety of reasons as to why they're important to me. So I can't answer, honestly. I would say that any book that I would say is a favorite of mine, that would be my answer. And it would be my answer for a different reason than another book that I named as a favorite. There's usually small little snippets of something that I really identify with. And if I can really identify with something that happens in any book, it doesn't matter if it's horror, of course. But obviously a horror story, usually it's something dark, something that I've been through, or something that I've experienced. Even if it's just something I've experienced mentally, I'm going to have to go with that because I honestly can't answer it. And you know what? Honestly, sometimes it's a horror story has become really important to me because of just how fun it was. And there's many of those books as well. All right, last prompt here is number 6, and it's a non-horror story that you consider to be horror anyways. I had to think about this one. There was a couple of answers that I came up with, but I think ultimately, this isn't a horror story. It's a crime story. It's by Jim Thompson, and it's called Pop 1280. This book isn't a standard horror story by any means. It's about a sheriff who, if you've seen The Killer Inside Me, the movie, or read that book, it's very similar to that. It's about a guy who's looking to get reelected as sheriff in his town, and one situation leads to another. He basically commits a crime, and he has to commit other crimes in order to keep that one crime hidden, and the story just keeps escalating and escalating until it climaxes at the end. And the reason why I think it's horror, even though it's not horror, is because the ending is just you don't see it coming, and it's just out there. It's very much a horror story all on its own. And I was listening to Laird Barron on a podcast about 2 years ago, and he was talking about this novel, and he pretty much said what I just said, that the ending of that is very much a horror story. And And so I had to go and check it out, of course. And I'm glad I did, because it's a pretty wild ride from beginning to end. But that ending is definitely something out of a horror novel. All right, I'm not going to tag anyone. If you haven't done this tag yet, I'm pretty sure most of the horror booktubers have done it. But if you haven't done it, and you're a horror booktuber, then consider yourself tagged. All right, that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next bookish video. Keep being safe and keep being creative.